We live in a world that is constantly developing technology, discovering passions, and connecting in new ways. As a result, the way that we view certain ideas and activities has shifted. The definition of a sport is one of these things. Recent classifications have called competitive video games such as Fortnite, StarCraft II, Call of Duty, and Rocket League sports. There is international interest in auto racing, chess, and debate, yet these arguably require minimal physical ability. Furthermore, many criticize cheerleading, dancing, hunting, fishing, and archery, claiming that as they are often not competitive, they're not sports. In short, there is significant debate in our society about what the word means and which activities fall into the category.
I think often it is something that is physically exerting, and it could be individual or on a team.
An activity involving exercise in a team. Anything that keeps your heart rate up. Something that involves athletic movements. A sport is sweating? Is it a competition where people are paying attention to the outcome, or simply anything active? Other responses by athletes and parents of athletes to this question detail that the definition of sport depends on cultural context, or that it shifts, quote, based on the intentions in each situation. I have Whitworth basketball player Quincy McDeed with me here in the studio. Quincy, how do you classify a sport versus an activity?
Yeah, I think I take sports more seriously than an activity. I feel like an activity is just something to do for fun, and then a sport's something that's built into my schedule, sort of.
In 4 years of high school cross country, softball, basketball, and now college basketball, I have crossed paths with an abundance of definitions and perceptions surrounding sports. Many constructive, some demeaning, but above all, most biased. I have found that the only absolute consistency is inconsistency. We need a comprehensive definition for this concept. I know you're thinking, why should anyone care about the formal definition? It is not as if we sit around the dinner table taking turns reading definitions from the S section of Merriam-Webster. But seriously, there are certain benefits to participating in a sport that don't apply to every activity. For example, commitment, connection, engagement, physical exertion, and competition are pillars of the majority of definitions of sport that are advantageous to participants. Athletes, parents, and fans alike should consider whether or not the activity they support is providing these opportunities. On the other hand, the expansion and evolution of the term means that the idea of sport is more inclusive to those with limited physical ability or lack of interest in traditional disciplines. As a parent, the physical, emotional, and economic support of your child impacts the activities in which they are excited to participate. Hence, this controversial question should be of great importance to you. What is a sport, and what are the benefits of your child participating in these over other activities? I have the pleasure to be here in the studio with Debbie Simons, mother of a softball, basketball, cross-country, and swim athlete. Deborah, what are the benefits of your child participating in organized sports?
She learns discipline, how to cooperate and work with other people, communication skills, the ability to persevere when it's hard. Those are, I think, some of the main ones.
Those are all valid, and the best part is they are accompanied by so many others. Through exploration of existing definitions, relevant debates, public opinion, and expert opinion, I'm here to guide you, a parent of a current or potential athlete, to a logical definition of sport so that you can motivate your child towards fulfilling, beneficial activities that promote their well-being. The summer before freshman year of high school, my mom managed to convince her grudging daughter, otherwise known as me, to train with the cross-country team in order to get involved and meet people before school started. This was pretty ironic, considering that I had spent the entirety of middle school convincing my friend Danny, a track and cross-country athlete, that running was not a sport. Perhaps it was this stubborn opinion that made it so difficult to show up to that first practice. Sure enough, June 9th, 2015, I stood on Cowan Field in my shorts and New Balance running shoes, nervous as ever. That summer and for the next 4 years, I found running competitively to be more physically challenging and rewarding than any other part of my life. My ignorant opinion that running is not a sport changed quickly, but on what specific criteria? Is it the competitive aspect, the physical exertion, the fact of being on a team, having 6 practices a week, or something entirely different? Let's take a look at some of the existing definitions of sport. Merriam-Webster, a highly regarded modern dictionary, takes a very general approach. It claims that a sport is, quote, a particular activity, such as an athletic game, so engaged in, end quote. This definition fails to offer necessary detail, and therefore does not do much in terms of advancing our specific definition of sport. The Oxford English Dictionary, on the other hand, dives deeper. They state that a sport is, quote, an activity involving physical exertion and skill, especially one regulated by a set of rules or customs in which an individual or team competes against another or others, end quote. To state it plainly, according to Oxford, a sport involves physical exertion, skill, rules, and competition. If we look to Title IX, a civil rights law banning discrimination based on gender in athletic activities, we see a slightly different definition emerge. An activity can be considered a sport under Title IX if it meets specific criteria, including having coaches, practices, and competitions during a defined season, and a governing organization. This activity must also have competition as its primary goal, not merely the support of other athletic teams. So far, competition and regulations set by a governing organization are 2 consistent characteristics of sport. The Women's Sports Foundation, an educational nonprofit charity focused on female involvement in sports, also takes a stance in the debate. According to this definition, a sport must be a physical activity which involves propelling a mass through space or overcoming the resistance of mass. Contesting or competing against or with an opponent is required. It must be governed by rules that explicitly define the time, space, and purpose of the contest and the conditions under which a winner is declared. The detailed specifics concerning the physical component by the Women's Sports Foundation is unique. However, in general, it too warrants physical activity, rules, and competition as staples of a sport. Where Oxford, Title IX, and the Women's Sports Foundation focus on the sport itself, the International Olympic Committee must consider larger scale factors, such as international interest, in their definition. Sport, according to the IOC, refers to all events sanctioned by an international sport federation. According to Robert Wood of Topin Sports, the number of sports represented has fluctuated over time, from 9 at the first Olympic Games in 1896 to 33 set to occur in the 2020 Tokyo Olympic Games. Encyclopedia Britannica points out that all sports currently included involve physical exertion and lead to the awarding of medals. In order to be accepted, a sport must be widely practiced by men in 75 countries and by women in at least 40 countries. The sport must also increase the value and appeal of the Olympic Games and retain and reflect its modern traditions. The definition specifically excludes mind sports and sports dependent on mechanical propulsion. At this point in our exploration, several key components of a sport seem to be emerging. Although certain organizations or pieces of legislation have increasingly complex definitions, the essentials in order to promote the well-being of athletes are as follows. First and foremost, a sport requires physical exertion. Over 70% of athletes and parents, the International Olympic Committee, Women's Sports Foundation, and Oxford English Dictionary ground their definition of sport in the physical exertion required. Why is physical activity important? Donald Morton, deputy editor of the Sterling Observer, outlines the direct benefits on mental and emotional health. These include promoting positive body image, high self-esteem, and decreased anxiety and stress. Personally, after being active at practice, I find it much easier to be productive and motivated to do homework or any other task. I feel refreshed and recharged. Not to mention, it is much easier to fall asleep at night if I had practice or exercise during the day. Participation in activities requiring physical exertion has fallen as the popularity of entertainment via television, video games, and the internet rises. During this same period, the incidence of mental health disorders has risen sharply in all age groups. Research and clinical experience explained by the Gale Encyclopedia of Mental Health indicate that exercise can also be an effective treatment for more serious mental disorders, including severe depression, anxiety disorders, substance dependence, and even schizophrenia. The correlation cannot be ignored. Children and adults alike should be participating in sports that encourage them to use their body and therefore promote a healthy lifestyle. Secondly, a sport is centered around competition. This characteristic is a staple to the definition of sport by Oxford, the International Olympic Committee, Women's Sports Foundation, Title IX, and over 65% of athletes and parents who were surveyed for the purpose of this project. Competition as the primary goal, as opposed to mere support of other competing teams, is essential. The Hoopstars Select basketball program points out that where competition is involved, athletes must be dedicated, motivated to improve, exercise perseverance, and be goal-oriented to succeed. I have Devin Coop, a multi-sport athlete and freshman at Whitworth University, with me here in the studio. Devin, does the classification of sport versus activity affect your attitude or perception towards the thing in question?
I think sport comes with a more competitive mindset for me compared to an activity. An activity is something I'll do when I have free time, but a sport is something I'll put more of my time into.
These skills are beneficial in an athletic, classroom, and work setting. Additionally, competing provides a learning experience for athletes to accept both success and loss with grace and integrity. Lastly, a sport must be regulated by a specific set of rules. This quality of sport goes hand in hand with competition. The Olympic, Women's Sports Foundation, and Oxford definitions of sport mention this concept. According to Jennifer Woodworth, child psychologist, a set of rules for determining the winner, ensuring fair play, and keeping participants safe is essential. Additionally, they provide an opportunity for athletes to practice following directions and a consistent structure, which is helpful for many learning styles and personality types. Although a team is by no means a required element of a sport, encouraging your child to participate in some activity that involves teamwork will be very beneficial for them. The United States Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs claims that through a team, athletes learn how to be a leader, develop communication skills, and build community. Additionally, many children learn by watching others. Seeing others persevere and work hard can be motivating for your child. A team sport is a great opportunity for such development. Now that we're all on the same page about what a sport is, let's take some time to see this definition in action. I surveyed a group of 50 athletes and parents about the way that they classify sports versus activities. Of all the disciplines that were a part of the survey, cheerleading, auto racing, bowling, and video gaming came back with the least cohesive results. Apparently, there is much confusion around the way to classify each of these. With our comprehensive definition, it's finally time to provide a formal answer. Let's start with cheerleading. Sport or activity? The question is not whether cheerleading requires physical exertion, it undoubtedly does, but rather if it is competitive. At the majority of institutions, the primary purpose of the cheer team is to support other athletic groups. Cheer in this capacity is not a sport by definition. However, the argument for competitive cheer teams is far more compelling. The National Cheerleaders Association, International Cheer Union, and other organizations host formal competitions. Teams are scored on tumbling, acrobatic throws, and dance. The competition is governed by a specific set of rules outlined by the NCA and NDA. ABC News' Russell Goldman reports that in 2010, Quinnipiac University was sued for pulling money from the women's volleyball team in order to fund their cheer program. Judge Underhill on the case ruled that although they competed, quote, the university's cheerleading team did not qualify as a varsity sport for the purposes of Title IX. He stated that the program was underdeveloped at that point, but could possibly be considered a sport in the future. 9 years later, significant advancement has occurred. Therefore, cheerleading on teams such as that of Quinnipiac University, where attending high-profile competitions and competing is the central purpose, is a sport. What about auto racing? Well-trained drivers guide high-speed racing machines through laps around a track or course. The driver and crew shine the car, check seatbelts, and set up the radio prior to racing. Once the gun fires, competitors push the clutch and switch gears, trying to maneuver their vehicle to the front of the pack. David Hall, a professional NASCAR racer, accounts the thrill of the race, mentioning the competitiveness and keys to following the many rules and regulations. Surav Das of Sports Show claims that motorsports are the second most watched in the American continent. If this is true, then why do less than 50% of athletes consider auto racing a sport? There is no questioning its immense entertainment potential. However, we must consider if the competitors are athletes or simply professional drivers. Auto racing is a sport requiring skill, motivation, practice, strategy, and concentration with a large fan base and sponsorship. Most importantly, as detailed by Kurt Verlin on the Newswheel, race car drivers must exert themselves for 2 or 3 hours at a time, throwing their body into 1,000 curves, braking, pressing the gas, all the while in a car that could be as hot as 140 degrees. The ability to perform during competition comes from hours of physical training. Next, let's consider bowling. Playing casually and competitively are common, but by definition, are participants sporting? Rich Karuba of bowlingball.com points out that in 1988, bowling was included for the first and only time in the Summer Olympic Games. Under demonstration status, the purpose of its appearance was promotion of the sport. For this reason, it was not covered on television or in the media. It has been difficult for bowling to become a full Olympic sport, not only because it is expensive, but also because of the inherently unequal playing field. World Bowling explains why. First off, almost 85% of all bowlers are right-handed. This puts a lot more play on the right-hand side of the lanes, which will ultimately make the oil break down at a different pace than on the left-hand side. Secondly, lane patterns vary significantly, and it would be difficult to establish an Olympic pattern that was fair for all contestants. Nevertheless, bowling is a competitive sport with specific regulations on balls, lanes, and gameplay. World Bowling is the official governing body for the sport of bowling, recognized by the International Olympic Committee since 1979. They host world tours, world championships, and regional competitions for all levels and age groups. As for physical exertion, Karuba reasons that propelling a bowling ball that is 10% of your weight at nearly 20 miles per hour down a 60-foot narrow lane and knocking down 35 pounds of lumber certainly qualifies. Taking a turn towards a relatively recent debate, let's discuss video gaming, sport or activity. The explosive rise of video gaming in the 21st century has led to a large esports industry and fan base. The popularity and revenue is rising sharply. According to Onar Onlu, the fan base is expected to reach 557 million people by 2021. New York Times reporter Gunchar explains that gamers often train and compete in teams, such as Evil Geniuses, Dignitas, or Curse. The business model for such franchises are similar to those of MLB. Teams build community, learn dedication, and push each other to improve. Much time is spent developing manual dexterity, with finger exercises or worry balls, and quick reflexes. Top competitors train intensely but also benefit from generous salaries and corporate endorsement deals. Professional players compete in huge arenas cheered on by thousands of screaming fans with millions of dollars of prize money at stake. In terms of competition and regulation by a specific set of rules, esports certainly fit the bill. During competition and training, gamers exert their minds. But does this activity involve sufficient physical exertion? No. The lack of physical activity means that video gaming fails to provide certain crucial physical, emotional, and mental benefits to athletes, and should therefore be formally considered an activity. So why does any of this matter? Why should you encourage your child to participate in an activity that satisfies these criteria rather than any other? As long as they're entertained, right? Not right. The answer to so what is intertwined with the pillars of sport that we just outlined. Because they are physically exerting, competitive, and governed by a specific set of rules, organized sports promote physical activity, dedication, community, confidence, teamwork, goal setting, motivation, perseverance, following directions, communication skills, and leadership. In addition, the healthcare department of Missouri University claims that participation in organized sports can advance your child's cognitive development. Sports require memorization, repetition, and learning, skill sets that are directly relevant to work done in the classroom. I'll pass off the floor once again to Coop. Devin, what sports have you participated in?
In my entire life,
Yeah.
I've done ballet, dance, soccer, volleyball, flag football, basketball, track and field, tennis, gymnastics. I think that's all.
What are your favorite things about participating in organized sports?
My favorite things are the competitive nature that everyone has and the like mindsets that all the players have, and just getting to meet new friends that have similar hobbies as me.
Parent Thomas Curry has a positive impression of sports and the way that they have impacted his 3 athletes.
They experience teamwork and camaraderie. They work together towards a goal, either by themselves or with a group of people. They receive coaching. So there's somebody that's kind of guiding them and leading them in addition to their parents. And you can't have enough good leaders in your child's life. And I think they learn to lose well, which is very important.
All of these contribute significantly to the individual growth of an athlete. However appealing these benefits sound to you and your child, it is true that they are not easily accessible to everyone. Being physically active is one of the best things we can do for our physical and mental health, but certain learning styles, personalities, and physical abilities make it difficult for many children to participate. Morton asserts that as parents, mentors, or supporters, there's a lot you can do to make sports and the benefits of being physically active as welcoming and accessible as possible. According to Valle Dwight of Great Schools, in the large majority of public schools, students with disabilities participate in sports at much lower rates than typically developing children. Many school districts are not sure of how to include these students in physical education classes. Matt Laughlin is an elementary school physical education teacher in Redmond, Washington, who has learned a great deal about adapting activities in his classes so that all children have a constructive way to participate. He uses different materials, such as balloons instead of balls, to make certain activities less intimidating. He has also found that pairing kids with different abilities up during certain activities is a great way to create relationships across developmental borders and engage students. Furthermore, implementing separate roles in the activity that accommodate each child's unique abilities help them to participate and be able to receive the same physical and mental benefits as the rest of the class. For example, in a game of tag, children who get upset or feel anxious about being tagged are in charge of keeping track of who's it. They're part of the game and running around, but with no tagging. These strategies are some of the many that can be used to engage a greater range of students in sport-like activities. Jennifer Woodworth, a licensed clinical psychologist, offers further insight on how to help organized sports work for your child. First and foremost, she suggests that parents are involved in their child's athletic life. By talking to the coach and disclosing your child's learning style, strengths, and tendencies, you are preventing situations that could adversely affect their sports experience. She emphasizes the importance of positive reinforcement. Recognizing your child's perseverance, effort, focus, teamwork, stamina, speed, or another skill does volumes for their self-confidence and desire to further engage. In June of 2018, the University of Washington, which happens to be only 5 minutes from my house, hosted the United States of America Special Olympic Games. I was able to volunteer at and attend several of the events. More than 4,000 athletes and coaches representing 50 states and the District of Columbia, along with the support of tens of thousands of volunteers and spectators, came to compete in 14 Olympic-type team and individual sports. According to Beth Knox, CEO of the United States of America Special Olympics, the goal is to showcase the abilities of athletes with intellectual disabilities and to promote the ideals of acceptance and inclusion through sport. The event was inspiring, energetic, and well-attended. I love the way that it models and provides a vision for improving inclusion in athletics. Not every city gets the opportunity to host a huge event like the Special Olympics, but there are many local programs with a similar goal. Regardless of your child's abilities and interests, experiencing real inclusion in sports can be inspiring for their athletic journey. So what now? Should we all march around the city petitioning to terminate any non-sport activity? Should we force children to participate in things that they hate because of the physical benefits? No. This does not mean that you must unenroll your child in all activities that do not abide by the definition of sport. Any way that your child is engaging in community, finding passions, learning, becoming a leader, and practicing teamwork is extremely beneficial.
I think some of the benefits of athletics are, physical exercise and character building, and learning how to cooperate with other people. I think you can get that through other activities such as debate club or some other kind of extracurricular activity that a child is interested in.
That was Deborah Simons. Thank you, Deborah. The best way to put these findings to action is to ensure that in some matter, your child is receiving the mental, emotional, and physical benefits that a traditional sport provides. Their well-being is the most important. I'll end with a quote by Kristi Yamaguchi, the gold medal Olympic figure skater. An athlete gains so much knowledge by just participating in a sport. Focus, discipline, hard work, goal setting, and, of course, the thrill of finally achieving your goals. These are all lessons in life. Thank you so much for tuning in this morning. I'm Genevieve Simons, your host, and that was That's a Sport. Once again, I'd like to thank our special guests, Devin, Quincy, Thomas, and Deborah for joining me in the studio today.